Hi there. This is a recording on moving data between databases. This can be quite the Herculean task. And if you haven't done it before, these are some hints to help you do it. If you've done it before, hopefully this will point out some of the things you may have skipped in the past that came back to bite you in the rear. The stuff about me, my name is David Stokes. I am the community manager at DBeaver.com. If you need to reach out to me, this is a great email, and here's my LinkedIn. So, what do you need to do before you start moving data between databases? Well, our agenda today is we're talking about pre-migration planning and assessment. We're going to talk about data integrity and security. Then execution strategy, some steps you need to do after you've done the actual migration, and then the key risks that you need to consider before you even can start planning to start this process. Okay, pre-migration planning and assessment. I grew up in San Diego, California, where you had a lot of folks in the U.S. Navy and the U.S. Marine Corps, and you always heard the 7 Ps, and hopefully it doesn't offend someone, but the idea was proper planning prevents piss poor performance. The idea is you got to know what you're doing and have a plan and work that plan. So, step one. Go out there and take a good look at your data. Look at all the data sources, volumes. Do you know where everything is? You also need to know what's the hot, the frequently used versus the cold data. You might have some data that's hot certain times of the year, like if your company does income taxes in the US, probably through April, you don't want to touch anything. Might be colder a few months later. Also, if you're in the retail business, anything from mid-November to mid-January is going to be hot. Also, some parts of your data, the seasonality might affect other parts differently, so you have to map that out. Also, look at the dependencies. What applications use this data? When do they do that? What microservices do you use? And who is relying on this database and when? If you have something you need to take offline at a bad time, it's really going to hurt your users and your credibility. You have to find out what's being used, who's using it, and when. Also, overlaps and conflicts. So if the marketing folks say, hey, do this in the first week of March is fine, but that's not good for the folks in the warehouse, you're going to have to figure out a time that works for both of them, or get management buy-in to say which one is the priority. This is politically messy and socially messy, but you have to identify them. Also, downtime tolerance. Are you going to do everything all at once? Something that's hopefully short and a complete shutdown. This is my preference because it gives the least amount of sustained pain to people. Unfortunately, there's always going to be someone who's going to be inconvenienced. And usually if you inflict what you can over the shortest period is easier. Also, there's a trickle migration where you can move some things over piecemeal between one group versus another. Some groups you may have that have to be 724, 365, like hospital operations. You might be able to do something a little bit easier with other groups. Also ask who can limp along. So if things are kind of stuck, who are the folks that, doing it tomorrow is okay. And who are the folks that are vital that need to be up all 724, 365? You have to identify these folks and communicate with them what's going to go on and find out their needs. Next step is data cleaning. Remove duplicates. It's amazing how many folks, especially ones running data lakes or data oceans, have redundant sets of data or data that's just slightly different from another couple petabytes that they have sitting out there. Also, orphan records. You have stuff that was somehow abandoned, but you're not quite sure why, but you haven't gotten rid of them. Identify those and remove them if possible. Also, outdated data. If your tax information from 2001 is still out there and there's no good reason to keep it, back it up on some sort of long-term media, and move it off to tertiary storage or outside storage. Now, the hard part and the technically fascinating part for a lot of you is going to be if you're moving between different databases, say going from Oracle to Postgres. Data types don't always match up, functions don't always match up. There's things in Oracle SQL that aren't in Postgres and vice versa. And you have to have those syntax differences figured out, especially in stored procedures. Now, even close relatives like MySQL or MariaDB will have differences. And unfortunately, this ran off the slide here. Also, if you're moving, say, like from Postgres 14 to Postgres 18, there are things that have changed. You have to go through the release notes and make sure that you've done your due diligence to make sure that if you run into a problem, that there's something in the back of your mind that will say, hey, I remember something about this in the release notes. What's going on here? Data integrity and security. Data integrity security is probably the hardest part. If your data is churning a lot, it's hard to get a good snapshot. You'll have to somehow find a way to make things quiescent for a while and do that snapshot. And then you need to verify that backup. The data, the backup is not verified. It's like Schrodinger's cat. You're not quite sure if it's live or dead. And unfortunately, if there's any problems with it and things have gone according to Murphy's Law, you may have painted yourself into a corner that you can't get out of. So make backups, good backups, and then verify them and make sure that you can pull it back from them. Validation method. After you've moved the data over, who can you get to come take a look? Row counts, checksum, table level validation. Can someone who's familiar with the data go out there and check customer records to make sure that what was on the old system is now on the new system? And you have to identify these folks, and you have to make sure that you have claims on their time. So this is a top priority for them and their management to go through and access the data and make sure that it is exactly what you want. Security. You don't want to send all your data unencrypted over a wire where you might have someone listening. Remember, the internet is a party line. If you're doing stuff in-house, you still might want to encrypt it just in case. Paranoia of your data is not a bad thing. And if you have data that needs to be encrypted, PII, regulated data, GDPR, HIPAA, certain government classifications, you want to make sure that from start to finish that everything is protected the way it needs to be protected. Another step is go out to corporate legal. A company that I'm aware of a couple of years ago was moving from a very old system to a new system, and legal asked, well, could we keep the old hardware around, throw a tarp over it in the corner just in case we ever need to bring it back up as of the day that you shut it off? Well, is that a possibility? Well, not really, but they kind of wanted it that way just to make the lawyers happy. So you have to check with legal and see what they're saying. Okay. The other thing you're probably going to want to have to look at real quickly is things like foreign keys and triggers. While you're loading, you don't want them running on your data. It's going to slow things down and can cause all sorts of failures. So plan how to shut them off and then how to turn them back on. Also, check into parallelism. Maybe you can put in the accounts receivable at the same time you're doing the manufacturing CAD/CAM data. They don't interfere with each other. You can get them running in parallel. Execution strategy. This is the hardest part of the job. If you've done all the previous steps, you come to the point where you're going to have to use the tools, and this is where the rubber meets the road. Now, using specialized migration tools like the database migration servers from AWS or the cloud data transfer from Google are great tools. They're designed for big movements of data. There's other things like PG dump, MySQL dump, setting up replication between servers, between the old and the new. They all work. Once again, verify that they work and that your data is exactly what you want. There are other tools like DBeaver, who I work for. Our tool will let you take something and lift from one machine and put on another machine. So if you're migrating from, say, Oracle to MariaDB or Postgres, it will facilitate moving the data, doing the data type changes, and reestablishing connection on the new machine and moving the data over. Make sure this runs at the speed and the facility that you need. Now, the other big trick is run a trial. Just make sure that your assumptions are correct. Uh, Pick out 10%, 15% of your data, move it over, get it double checked, have everyone that you can swarm the data to make sure that it's exactly equal between the two systems. This is your chance to find problems before they shoot you in the foot. Now, as you're doing this, watch for bottlenecks. You don't want a DNS zone upgrade running while you're trying to do this. Make sure you're not on the same network as where they're doing LDAP updates or um, replication. Also, make sure that you have the horsepower for the CPU and the storage. I've seen places where they've um, tried to do the migration on a subnet that didn't quite have the bandwidth they needed, and that really hurts things. Okay, you get the data over, and you've done some spot checks. Everything looks great. 9 times out of 10, I can guarantee you that you have to go back and reestablish your indexes. Make sure your indexes do what they did on the old system and the new system. If you're changing database vendors, you might find that something runs better with a new index type. Like if you move something over from MySQL to Postgres, maybe a gin index runs better than B tree index. Are your materialized views there? They still work the same. If you're running histograms or have some sort of caching system set up, got to check on those also. And worst comes to worst, and things just blow up in your face and things are cratering. Know exactly how you're planning to migrate back to where you were without losing any new data. Okay, you've done your migration and you've checked the data. Everything looks great. Now comes the validation part. Do row counts, sample data, have some known test records that are the edge cases that you can check up on. The difficult customers, the important customers, go through and double check all that. Check the performance, explain on your queries. You might need to tune the query plans. If you've gone from an old version to a new version of software, you might find that things have drastically changed. Also, your new system just might run a lot differently on different hardware. Also, ask who from the application side of your environment can assist you. Can they spend time double checking that everything works right? Now, part of that work is going to be changing the application connection strings and configurations to point to a new database. If you're using something like a virtual IP and things don't map over as instantaneously as you wish, you're going to have to check on things like that. But get someone from the application side who really knows the flow of the data to make sure that things are going the way you want. Too often we don't check return codes and we just happily go on our way when the database is signaling, hey, I couldn't install that because you had a syntax error, but the application's already gone on to the next operation and there's no way to catch it. Okay, also set up monitoring. Doesn't matter very much what's your monitoring tool as long as it can alert you that there's high resources. Are your writes going sky high? What's your hit rate on your cache? Are things working right? Also ask who needs to be updated on what's going on. Your boss might want a 15-minute debrief every morning to start their day to see how things are going. Someone at a higher level in the C-suites might want a weekly update. You might have someone else who's an application manager who might want to get a text every hour, making sure that things are still flying. Also, the folks who need those low-level updates, make sure they're getting exactly what they need. Just don't give them a general generic update. Okay, we're going on to key risks now. Data type mismatches. Going between one machine and another can cause data truncation or precision loss. If you're going from a real to an integer, expect some of this, um, depending on your database. Also, make sure that things like a text field in Postgres is going to be different than one in, say, like MySQL. Make sure that things match up the way you want and that you're not losing precision. Now, look for incompatible SQL syntax that can break application code. If you're heavily using something like merge, that's in Postgres, but you now are going to MariaDB and it doesn't have merge, that's going to break your application. Also, there are subtle syntax changes. The SQL standard is a standard, but the implementation is left up to the vendor. And yes, vendors do change their behaviors over time. So be careful there. You have to read the release notes for every release between what you want from to what you're going to make sure. Also, pay attention on cost overruns. Poorly planned migrations frequently become a budgeting nightmare. It takes 3 times as long as you thought and much more overtime and pulled out hair than you ever planned on. Also, make sure your staff is aware of the extra load on them. If they're treading water to keep up with what's going on now and you throw on a migration, it may just be too much for them. Also, make sure that you do the best you can to keep your credibility, because if you're the quote idiot who screwed up moving from the old database to the new database, unquote, corporate-wise, that might be a major career-limiting move. So you don't want to do that. So make sure you're doing everything you can correctly. And with that, thank you for joining this conference. And if you have any questions, once again, I'm david.stokes@dbeaver.com. Thank you very much.